Welcome to Charlas, free info videos for immigration justice. Joining us today is Jeffrey O'Brien, an immigration attorney with decades of experience in refugee law and whose firm offers exceptional, affordable, and respectful legal assistance to people who seek to live in the United States. Also joining is Bartlomiej Skorupa, a co-founder of Mobile Pathways, who is an immigrant from Poland. Jeff, we know this past weekend that the Biden administration will extend immigration relief known as temporary protection services to Ukrainians in the US. What does that mean for Ukrainians here?
Temporary protected status is a temporary immigration status in the United States for certain people from countries in which it's difficult, if not impossible, to return to because they're unsafe, or there's been a natural disaster. In this case, we're talking about Ukrainians who have been in the United States since March 1st, 2022. And the Biden administration has extended TPS status to anyone who has been here in the United States since then and would like to stay here for up to 18 months. At the end of the 18 months, or before that, the Biden administration may choose to extend that, but we don't know yet. It will all depend on what happens in Ukraine near the end of that time.
And what does TPS mean for Ukrainians who are still in Ukraine or in their neighboring countries?
Well, temporary protected status only helps Ukrainians who are in the United States. It does not extend any immigration benefit to any Ukrainian outside of the United States. If Ukrainians outside of the United States need support, they need to humanitarian assistance, then they need to look to the United Nations or to the country to which they have fled to and ask for permission or fill out applications. But the TPS is not extended to people who are not on the ground in America.
All right, if I'm escaping the war in Ukraine and would like to come to the USA, how will I do that?
Well, the application to come to the United States is the same before the war and during the war, namely that you can only come to the United States if someone else has filed a petition for you, usually a family member, could be a parent, a spouse, sometimes adult children, and the visa has to be available, meaning that you don't have to wait for a visa to become available. And other ways to come to the United States, such as if you already have a visa and you plan to stay here temporarily, such as on a tourist or a business visa, some people will choose to do that. But you cannot apply for an immigrant visa for asylum or refugee status to come to the United States. The United States does not allow that or permit that at its US embassies and consulates around the world. You can only apply for asylum once you are inside the United States. So if, for example, you had an appointment with a US embassy or consulate and you said you were you'd like a tourist visa, for example, to come to the United States, but you plan to stay here, the US embassy or consulate would deny that because it contradicts your intention stated on your visa application. So if your intention is to come on a tourist visa or a business visa, but you also state that you intend to stay here permanently, they will deny you. And the same is true, let's say, even if you had a tourist visa and you come to the border of the United States, let's say you fly into New York or Chicago, and Customs and Border Protection asks you if you plan to stay in the United States permanently, and you say yes, that's different. It contradicts your visa, in which case there would be an extended interview, which is much more than just kind of coming across the border and presenting your documents.
What are the benefits of applying for TSP?
Another benefit of applying for a temporary protected status is work authorization. There are two different applications. that you would fill out if you wanted to apply for work authorization with your TPS. You cannot apply separately or just instead of the temporary protected status, so they have to go together. The TPS application is 821, Form I-821. You can find that on the USCIS website. The work authorization document is called the I-765 for an EAD, Employment Authorization Document. And that's a primary reason why people would want to apply for TPS, because they get a work authorization. With that, they could apply for a social security number, and they could present that to employers, and they would have unrestricted authorization to work in the United States during that period. When TPS expires in 18 months, the USCIS will inform you whether or not they plan on extending TPS, and if so, whether you need to file another application to extend your TPS or to extend your work authorization.
Okay, and can I just come across the border?
If you do come across the border, for example, through an airport or even through the southern border like in Mexico, the Mexican-American border, and you present yourself and tell them you are seeking refugee status in the United States, the US government should issue you a credible fear interview. A credible fear interview goes into depth about what happened to you. So it's not a matter of standing in line, presenting your passport, the Customs and Border asking you a few questions. What they would do is they would sit you in a room. They would conduct a formal interview by a US trained asylum officer, and they would issue a credible fear interview. Sometimes they can be as short as 30 minutes, but sometimes they can last up to 3 hours, in which case they ask you all the reasons why you're fleeing the country. If they find that you have passed the credible fear interview, that does not grant you permanent status in the United States, but rather they will file your documents with the immigration court, and the immigration judge will then listen to your testimony again about why you cannot return to your home country. In these processes, there will be background checks, and before they allow you into the United States, to make sure you don't have criminal background. They want to make sure everyone is safe to enter the United States. And during that process, you could be detained. You have no legal right to enter the United States until the US has determined you have a legal right to enter the United States. And during the process, you may be detained. Hopefully you won't be detained, and they would file your case with the immigration court, in which case you would get a notice at the address mailed to you usually after they released you. And they would mail a notice of when to attend your court hearing date, in which case you want to make sure to attend on every date that the government assigns you.
What kind of evidence do I need to prove eligibility?
The first piece of evidence that goes with basically any immigration application is your passport. Submit a complete copy of your passport. The next piece of evidence is proof that you have lived in the United States at least since March 1st, 2022. And the most common way people prove that is they show their I-94 card, which you can file or you can find online, i94.cbp.dhs.gov. And with the government there, you can enter your passport number and name, and they should be able to find when you flew into the United States. You can print that out, submit that with your application. If you came across the southern border, for example, many people do, you clearly cannot go to that website, and you'll have to establish residency in the United States. And you can show using receipts, rental agreements, other documents that have your name and date indicating that you have been in the United States since March 1st. And if you have committed any crimes in the United States, that is definitely needed for your TPS application, and you will need certified court records. It's called a certified court disposition to submit with your application. If you have multiple crimes or any crime, I would suggest seeing an attorney because that will certainly impact your application.
Are there any filing fees?
There's also a filing fee. If you file just for TPS without the work authorization and you're over 14, I believe it's $50. If you want to apply for the work permit as well, it's an additional $410. And if you're over 14, you'll also have to pay for an $85 biometrics fee.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Now, Bart, right now the country to host the most Ukrainian refugees is Poland. What does the situation look like on the ground?
Poland's response to the refugee crisis has really been outstanding. About 1 million people have made it into Poland already, with 4 million expected in the coming weeks if the war continues to grind on. Most remarkable, the Polish government is treating Ukrainians like Poles. They get access to the same healthcare system, so they get free healthcare and benefits. Their kids can attend schools. Children also receive a 500 zloty monthly stipend. That's about $125 that is provided as direct cash assistance. You also get direct cash assistance at the train stations. So even though refugees are heading to other Eastern European countries, Poland has by far the best humanitarian offerings at this point. If you are in Poland and would like to open your home to refugees, please consider using airbnb.org. You can easily sign up your apartment or house for refugees. And the IOM, International Organization for Migration, is on the ground providing humanitarian assistance in train stations all throughout Poland. So thank you to everyone supporting, and thank you again to the people of Poland for welcoming Ukrainian refugees into our home.
Jeff, Bart, thank you very much for your time.